Hello and welcome. My name is Shannon Kemp, and I'm the Chief Digital Officer of DATAVERSITY. We would like to thank you for attending DATAVERSITY Demo Day Data Quality. We're very excited to have you join us for this event set up to give you an overview of tools and services available for your data management programs. Just a couple of points to get us started. Due to the large number of people that attend these sessions, you will be muted during the event. For questions, we will have a Q&A at the end of each presentation today. We'll be collecting questions via the Q&A section. And if you'd like to chat with us and with each other, we certainly encourage you to do so. To open the chat or the Q&A panels, you may find those icons in the bottom middle of your screen for those features. And for this event, we will send a follow-up email within the next week to all registrants containing links to the recordings and slides from today's presentations. Now let's kick off our fourth session with Anomalo. And let me introduce our speaker for this session, Tali Canfy. Tali leads the Data Solutions Architect team at Anomalo. She has over 17 years of experience as a practitioner in analytics. Tali joined Anomalo because she fell in love with the product and its ability to help data and analytics practitioners use a true platform for the day-to-day problems they need to solve with duct tape and chicken wire. Prior to working for Anomalo, Tali ran the Audience Lab team at Epsilon. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Tali. Hello and welcome.
Hi everyone. So let me share my screen. Sorry, am I ready to go?
Yeah, oh, sorry, I said looks great.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is Anomalo. I'm going to spend this time kind of giving you an overview of the Anomalo platform on some sample data, and then we'll have time at the end for any questions that you might have. So Anomalo is a data quality tool that sits on top of your cloud data warehouse. We support a wide variety of different cloud data warehouses. So obviously the modern data stacks, the Snowflake and Databrickses and BigQueries of the world, but also more legacy products like Postgres or SQL Server. I'm just going to back out of this because I'm going to use some data that I've already added. And when you log into Anomalo, this is what you would see. See, we have a bunch of tables that have already been configured, and they're sort of in different statuses. What I'm going to walk you through today is how you would configure a new table with Anomalo, and then once a table is configured, what kind of information you would get out of the platform. So first of all, we have a bunch of navigation options here. One of them is labels, which is kind of like our version of tags. And I'm using this to just find a new table to show you what happens if a table isn't configured. I can just click on the table and hit this configure button. And then I'm going to have a choice if I want to do the deep data quality monitoring, which is what I'll be demoing today. But we also have a more lightweight version of monitoring, which I'll show you in a bit. Configuring a table in Anomalo is really easy. What you need to do is let us know what time column specifies when you have new rows in your table. So in this case, we're looking for kind of more of a business date as opposed to an ETL date. So here I'm going to choose the transaction timestamp. And then my second decision is I need to decide when do I want to get an alert if I don't have data from yesterday. So here, this is in Pacific time. That's 8 a.m. my time. That's a great time for these alerts to come. So I'm just going to click configure, and then I am going to choose where I'd like the alerts to go. We can provide alerts to Slack, to Microsoft Teams, to PagerDuty, via email. So wide variety of options there. And that's all it is. As you saw, it took me less than a minute, and then my table is configured. And these checks are going to, start running. I'm now, as you can see, we have these 6 areas of default checks, and I'm actually going to switch to a table that's already configured where the checks have already run for the rest of this demo. So you can see I can filter here, and I'm going to show you a different table. So this is what happens once a table is configured and you have different sections of checks. So first of all, to give you an overview of the table homepage, right, we have this field here where I can link to information about the data, or this is where a lot of our customers integrate with their data catalog, like the Alations of the world. we have these sections of checks that I will talk through in a few minutes. And then, as you see, we're a visualization-rich tool. So we're going to provide you with a lot of information to give you context on what the data is that you're looking at. So this is a source of synthetically generated credit card data that I have downloaded from Kaggle. As you can see, we're showing you the row count for the past 100 days. So since this is kind of like a synthetic data set, it only has 5,000-ish rows each day. Then we have this columns visualization. So this shows you all of the columns that we have in this table, and it'll kind of show you for a low cardinality column what it contains. So here are transaction types, right? These are fake credit card transactions. We can see we have mostly chip transactions, but also some swipe transactions, right? And some online transactions, right? I can see right here which of my columns don't appear to have a lot of nulls versus which columns have a good amount of nulls. I can see what all of the columns are in my table. I also have this profile, right, which is kind of more useful for numeric columns, but it'll tell me, from a sample of 500 records, that the transaction ID is unique across all of them, but the merchant ID is not unique across all of them, for example. Then I also have this sample of rows in the table. So I don't know if anyone else does this, but whenever I'm kind of digging into a table that I haven't worked with for a while, the first thing I do is select star limit 1,000. So I can just take a little peek at what the data looks like under the hood. We have all of that information available to you in Anomalo, so you can kind of scrub through and see what it looks like. And then finally, we're showing you information about how the columns are correlated. So phi-k is a really cool correlation metric that works for both categorical and numeric data. And the way I kind of look at this, and it's very correlated with this dendrogram here, but I look for squares of, dark, which is high correlation. And that a lot of times that shows me how a table was put together and what the underlying parts are, right? So for here, for example, user ID, user address, user zip are all correlated because these are the different parts of the address. And we're just showing the most diverse columns here. So you get a lot of information, even when there are no data issues in your table, that kind of help you do that data archaeology work, right? And understand your tables better. Now I'm going to go through the kind of default checks that you get when you do that table configuration that I demoed at the beginning with Anomalo. I'll talk through what they do, and then I'll kind of show you how you can set up custom checks for your specific use cases. So the table observability section, this is all based on the metadata. So that is the information schema-like data that's available across different cloud data warehouses. And these are lightweight checks that are running hourly, right? So we're making sure that no columns are dropped in the table, that the table or the view exists. This is a view, so we're not seeing the table freshness, but I can show you what it looks like on another table. These are Bitcoin transactions that I will pull up in a second, and this is an actual table. So you would also get these checks for no unexpected delay in table update, and that the table has the expected number of rows, right? So this is looking kind of at the whole size of the table and letting you know that it's growing over time at the rate that you would expect. And this is a really easy way to get some validation on your pipelines, even if you're having tables that update multiple times a day. Now, after those table observability sections, we get into data quality, which is kind of the meat of the Anomalo product. And what really differentiates this is that we are querying your actual data, not just pulling that information schema-like data off of the metadata. So the main paradigm here with using Anomalo is that it makes the most sense to check your data using a business date rather than a load date, and kind of waiting for that business date's data to be complete. The first thing we're going to check is data freshness, which is, do I have new rows when I'm looking at the data using that business date? And we're a visualization-rich tool, so you can click into all of these checks and you're going to get some additional context on the table. In this case, we're showing you the row counts for the past 35 days, and that gives you context, in case the row count is 0. You can see, does that happen a lot, or has it not happened in the past month? Then after we validate data freshness, and this will pass if there's at least one new row in the table, we run the data volume check, which answers the much more complicated question of, given the history of this table, do I have all the rows that I would expect to have? And the way we do this is via a time series model. So the gray line over here, those are my actual row counts for the table. And the green area is what my time series model kind of predicts as valid row ranges for this table. So anytime this gray line is below this green area, I would get an alert if it was after that time I set when I configured the table. We can see this is a view. This table is available pretty quickly, but I'll show you an additional view that is consistent with the time series elements in our platform, right? We have this forecast zoom. So fun fact, this little gray bar is clickable. And I can see the whole history of this table, including what days we were a little bit under on the row count, and Anomalo would have alerted. And then we're fully transparent with you about our time series model. You can see all of the things that are going into the model. For example, the overall trend, holiday spikes, season of year, day of month, and day of week seasonality. And then we're showing you a forecast for how we got to the average predicted number of rows for these days and comparing that to the actual data. The other thing to note is that both data freshness and data volume are gating checks. That means the other checks on this table won't run until these checks pass. And after they pass, after we think we have all the rows for a given day, we look for any evidence if data is missing. So missing data can take the form, one of the biggest ones that people look for is an increase in null values. So again, this is using our unsupervised machine learning, and it's a visualization-rich tool, so you can kind of see what's happening here. These are the columns in the table that have null, so you can see, merchant state is about 12% null, as is transaction zip code, and then transaction errors, right? This is 98% null because it probably makes sense for it to be null. And what's great about this check is something that's really hard, right? When you're setting up manual data quality rules is like, how many nulls is too many, right? When should you get an alert? So if there were, as you saw, there were 40 columns in this table, or 42, right? So if any of the columns that currently have no nulls all of a sudden have a null, then this alert would go off. Additionally, for a column like merchant state or transaction zip code, right? If these spiked up to 20%, that would probably be statistically significant and this alert would go off. For user address line 2, seems to be sparsely populated. If it went from 71%, to 77%, that probably wouldn't be statistically significant. We wouldn't get an alert. We also kind of give you context on that history. So you can see since this table has been configured, that these fields are consistently null. So if all of a sudden you saw different sized circles for one of these fields, you could tell that it was noisy. This works using unsupervised machine learning, and we can tell here this is a sample data set that hasn't had any issues with it. So we're looking at an anomaly score for the increase in nulls relative to prior snapshots of data and to yesterday's data. And you can see that it's really consistent over here. And these unsupervised machine learning models, they kind of have a 2-week period where Anomalo is learning the amount of noise to expect on the table. So in the beginning, we have this really high assumption for how much noise you have on the table. And you can see it's gone down because this table is really consistent. If you have a table that's being updated in place, you wouldn't see such a smooth green line here, and it would jump up and down. Other checks that we do is the no drop in segment records check. So this is going to look at your no cardinality columns, your text columns. So for example, if we have MasterCard, Visa, and Amex, right, and Discover, if Discover suddenly dropped out of this data set, that would cause an alert to go off because that segment would disappear. And this check also uses unsupervised machine learning. Finally, we have this table anomalies section of data. So that is where we look for kind of anything that doesn't fit in those other sections. And one of the big ones we do is no previously unique columns have duplicate data. So here we're showing you that transaction ID is unique. If all of a sudden transaction ID was no longer unique, this went from 100% to 99.9%, you would get an alert. And then finally, we have the table anomalies check. this is our Powerhouse check that looks for unknown unknowns in your data. So it looks for things like, is there any, when comparing today's data to yesterday's data, do we have any, is there anything that materially changed, right, in terms of the distributions of columns? So we can even detect for that. So these 4 areas of checks, when you configure the table and choose the deep data quality monitoring, you we call it, you get them for free automatically by opting in to monitoring on the table. And the idea here is to give you kind of a broad level of coverage, right? You have the pipeline coverage at the top, which is going to show you it from the metadata, if your jobs are running, but also on a business state level, right? Do you have new rows in the table? Is the data late? Is any data missing? So a lot of those kind of default checks that you would want on most tables, you can easily opt in and get a broad level of coverage that's going to cover issues that you're probably already aware of, like increases in nulls and those kind of unknown unknowns like the table anomalies. And then finally, we have these 2 other sections under key metrics and validation rules, where you can put in custom checks to look for specific things that you care about. And I'm going to create some rules that I know are going to fail so that I can kind of show you what it looks like when a check fails. So here under validation rules, the first thing I want to show is that we have a huge library of low and no code checks, as well as custom SQL checks. I love writing SQL, and I'm sure some of you do too. So you can choose column value, column always matches a pattern, column never matches a pattern, and you can search here. So I'm going to create a rule that I know will fail, just so that you can see what it does. And remember, when I was talking through that null values check, right, we noticed that merchant state is sometimes null. So all I need to do is choose that column, and I'm going to hit save and run. And then you can see that our check now is running. Something else to know about Anomalo: when you click on a check when it's running, we show you the code that you're running against your cloud data warehouse, which is really useful for troubleshooting and also just really having a deep understanding of what the check is doing. And I can just refresh this here, and it will run in just a minute. I can see this check failed as expected. And it'll let me know, okay, how many null values do I have, right? I can see I have 593 null values. We've been using this as a demonstration, so this check has been running for a while, so you can see kind of like the history by day of how many failures you have. And then we do this root cause analysis, which what this is doing is taking a sample of rows that caused the check to fail and comparing them to a sample of rows where it didn't fail. So here you can see that the state is null where the merchant city equals online. And what this tells you is that all of the rows where the check is failing have the merchant city as online, versus none of the rows where it's not failing have it set to online. Then you can see kind of California over indexes on these, but you can see that it's much less statistically significant. We also show you a sample of the bad rows, the rows that cause the check to fail, which you can either scrub through, or you can download as a CSV, or you can show the SQL to pull it from your cloud data warehouse. And this is really useful because if you're ever working cross-functionally to resolve one of these issues, the first question you get is, can you send me a sample of the rows where the issue is occurring? So we kind of take that step out and make it easy for you. We also show you a sample of the good rows so that you can kind of think through how they are different. We also have this triage functionality in the tool where you can hit acknowledge and resolve. And for anyone curious, we also have an integration to Jira for this triage feature. So say it's a big issue, you want to investigate it, you can also send that to Jira. But I'm going to resolve this, and I can make a comment, online transactions, this is expected. So that's how our validation rules work. Then we have key metrics. Key metrics are different from validation rules in that they're based on aggregates of your data and how you want to see those things moving over time. So, this is like if we can do a column metric is not anomalous. We have everything empty string value %, maximum, mean. Let's look at the maximum transaction amount just out of curiosity. So I'm going to look at transaction amount USD. This is going to build a time series of the highest transaction every day and let me know if things are anomalous. And we have a whole slew of advanced options where we could change the priority level, add filters to the to the data, and do some other things there to see what's really going on under the hood. Let's give this a second so we can see this is running. I am refreshing the page. It should be back. And I can click here, and then so this is showing me the highest value transaction each day, and it's building a time series on it. And again, I have those UI elements I showed you earlier where I can kind of scroll back. So this check would have probably alerted on these days when there was a spiky transaction, which could be a fraudulent transaction. And again, we're showing you how the time series model is working, so we can see there's a lot of impact on holidays, have a strong impact on people's spending behavior in this data set. Some other key metrics that I would like to highlight are our segment checks. So I'm going to look for, this is just looking at the number of rows by state, and this is actually building a separate time series model for every single state. And fun Anomalo feature is I can actually click on these green bars and it will take me to the time series model of that individual state, which I can then scrub through. So very cool way to go deep into your data. And then this is, again, how we see kind of teams of analysts. A lot of what I see at our customers is that we'll have like a centralized data platform team, right, who is into the table observability features and kind of just having that broad level of coverage across a bunch of tables. But then we'll have kind of subject matter specific analysts like marketing analysts that have specific checks that they're more interested in. And that's where we get more into these key metrics and things like these segment checks. Some other check types that I would like to highlight is we have, we can look for differences in historical data. So what this is doing is it lets you put in a custom SQL query, and then we'll run that query today and run it again yesterday, we'll run it again tomorrow. And if those metrics change, this check will fail, and it will let you, it's a way to track if your data is being updated in place and you want to be aware of material differences. Finally, I would like to highlight Pulse, which is our executive dashboarding feature. So this lets you kind of work through, see how many tables you have in Anomalo, and have a summary over time of what they're doing. So here you can see you're monitoring 8 tables, only 6 of them are complete, 3 of them are fully healthy. And then we break that down by checks also. And then as a visualization rich tool, we're kind of showing you all the things so you can see the number of tables. You can kind of see the days in the past where there were some data incompleteness issues. And you can kind of see if there are tables where there are failures. So for example, I can click here and it will take me to the data freshness failure on this table, right? And I can see this table is stale. It hasn't updated since Sunday. So there have been some issues that happened in the past week, which it's not catching. Sorry, I was showing Pulse. So yeah, so it makes it really easy to investigate and see how often issues are happening. Here we can see, the percentage of tables that are fully healthy, meaning no checks are failing. And again, you can see, so this is our testing data. We have some things that fail all the time. We don't have customers that have any tables like this because everyone's top notch about their data quality. You can see the number of checks per table here, and the success rate of the automated checks. You can see these exclamation points are like errors that you might want to look into. And then we break that down by your validation rules. And you can see all of the rules that I've set up to fail on purpose to demonstrate what the product does, as well as a lot that always succeed. And then the same thing for your key metrics. And then you can, makes it really easy to troubleshoot if you have kind of a bad rule or validation rule here. So that's kind of the main overview I have about the platform. Some other things I'd like to call out that are really useful is we have, in all of these checks, something that's sometimes fun is to look at the run history. And then we can go, to the overall table. It'll probably be a little bit more interesting here. But you can click here on run history, and then we can filter it by status. So a lot of times, the failures are more interesting than the successes, and we can see kind of some checks that failed and what those tend to look like. So here we have a check which is looking for unexpected values for the merchant state. And, we're doing that root cause analysis. So it looks like it not seeing anything specifically very meaningful here, I think, because it's a, it's a large set of rows. We also have a place in the tool where you can put in documentation. So this is if you just wanted to use Markdown to kind of put in some information about your tables. And over here, it just, if you wanted a quick place to look at what all of the columns in your table are, we also have this activity tab, which a lot of our customers use for auditing. So this is where you could see, this is where you could see kind of what users created rules and changed rules on both the checks and the tables. And then finally, I'll give an overview of some of our settings, right? Organizations. So I would say important here are data sources, and we also have notifications. So this is kind of where you could add, that's not correct, where you could add a Slack channel or add an MS Teams notification to the channel. That you might want to see. Here's where you could manage and configure those labels that I talked about, and kind of just do kind of all of the management on your deployment here. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions.
Tally, thank you so much for this great presentation and demonstration. So if you have any questions for Tally, feel free to submit them in the Q&A portion of your screen. I'll give everyone a moment to type in their questions. And while we're doing that, Tally, can you just tell me what's the biggest aha moment you get from your customers when they start implementing Anomalo?
I think the biggest aha moment I get from my customers is they realize something that they didn't know about their table. Like, they thought they didn't have nulls, but actually those nulls were coded as empty strings or as zeros, or they actually don't know how often their data updates. A lot of times as we work together on table configuration, it's when, we find out when does the job actually run that update to the table.
Very nice. And people are being quiet. You gave such a great demo that they have no questions. There we go. We got a question coming in. So can you schedule checks outside of business hours?
Yeah. So the way the checks run is we have kind of two table configuration options. Like one is where at midnight, we start checking for the data using those gating checks and determining if they have all run. Or there's an option where you can just run all of the checks at a set time. We also have an API, and we also have some checks that you can schedule via cron. So that's where you have a very specific validation. You want to make sure bad values didn't enter the table, and you can just set it up to run whenever you want to run it.
Very nice. And is it deployed fully behind the firewall, or is it just a software as a service offering?
We can do both. We have a software as a service offering, and then we also have we can do in VPC deploy. So it just really depends on you, your security team, and what you need.
Great. And do you have a free trial?
Typically, that would be a question for our sales team, but we typically do like a hands-on pilot.
I like it. And can you integrate the metrics with data catalogs to create visibility to the data quality of the data assets? If yes, how do you integrate, or with what data catalogs do you integrate with?
Yeah, so we can definitely integrate with data catalogs. We have a lot of joint customers with Alation, so we have a really great integration there. We can also, I think, integrate with Atlan. We have customers using Data Hub. So it just depends on what your stack is internally and how we can fit into it.
And I see you have a link to integrations on your website. I'll put that in the chat for everyone as well. Do you have customers on Snowflake or other cloud solutions?
Yeah, we have a lot of customers on Snowflake. So if we go back to this connected data source, we can support all of these data sources. You can see Snowflake, BigQuery, Databricks, Redshift, all of those are cloud.
Nice. And do you have any checks for standard semantic types like currency or country?
So those are things that we would typically, do with the validation rule. So a lot of times, working, we would kind of like work with you on setting that up as a validation rule. What you could do, right, is like the values are in a set. You could put it in there. We also have loaded like a PII detection product, which figures out those types dynamically.
Perfect. We've got some time if anybody's got additional questions. Any other common questions that you get, Tally, from your customers that maybe we haven't addressed yet?
I get a lot of questions, I think about specific data sets that customers want to do. So I think the main thing is, we can support our bread and butter use case is kind of in a table that's updated daily. But when the table is updated more often than daily, I work a lot with customers on finding custom solutions like, are you getting enough coverage from this table availability versus the setting up custom like cron checks that would validate that things are running at certain times. And then also if you have data that's updating weekly, how do you get the right coverage on that?
And I'm getting feedback that this is such a great, clear demonstration that there's really not a lot of questions. Tally, you mentioned that you joined Anomalo because you loved the product. What was it that you loved so much about it that you joined the company?
I think it's just all of the information that you get in the visualizations. I think kind of in prior jobs, right? A lot of these things, it's like, look, you can set up a cron to make sure that your like job is running or there aren't nulls in a field. But then what happens when that alerts and sends you an email, right? You need to investigate it and figure out what's going on. And I just feel like Anomalo puts you 3 steps ahead of the game, right? Because we've pulled the sample of rows, we've already kind of that root cause analysis. It's like, figuring out these are all of the column value pairs and what correlates with this. Like that's something that you would do manually all the time. And I love kind of having that done for you so that you can act on these data quality issues. And get back to your day job, which typically is not responding to data quality issues.
Oh, I love that. So, Tally, can you integrate checks into ETL jobs to perform in processing quality checks? And if so, can you support different solutions?
Yeah, so we have a variety of things. So something I forgot to show is we have our documentation over here in the product, and then we also have a fully featured API. So a lot of times what customers will do is if they want to integrate it into their ETL, they will just use the API. We have like a run checks endpoint, and they will run the checks after the ETL job runs.
Perfect. And can components, validations, et cetera, set up, developed, and orchestrated from an external or
Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Sure. Can components validations set up, developed, in Anomalo be orchestrated from external orchestration engines?
Yeah, we have an integration with Airflow. So that's what a lot of our customers use. We have an Airflow operator. You can also do it from like Databricks workflows, or customers are using different things, then they can always just use the API to integrate.
Sweet. And back to the ETL, banking info such as IBAN and SWIFT, BIC code, bank addresses, et cetera, has context menu, is the comment there. If you want to add anything else.
I'm not sure if that's for me. So again, if you can type a regex to do it, or if there is another table in your database that we have a lot of foreign, multiple tables or columns is an option in the database, right? So it's like you can do a validation of like a foreign key, but validating like different data types isn't a feature of the product today.
And Tally, is it possible to export results for further analysis or presentation in the likes of PBI?
I'm not sure what PBI is, but we can Power BI. Yeah, so all of this data, there's a couple ways that people do these integrations, but you can kind of download the images, right? You can copy the queries, and then there's the check results from the API. So one thing a lot of our customers do is like they'll build a custom version of this Pulse using the API output that kind of is for your organization's needs, that correlates with your other data sources. And we also have people doing things like using the image URL, right? We have sometimes people will put like specific images into Alation or other things like that.
Perfect. Well, that is all the questions that we have so far. We do have a couple minutes left, so I want to give everyone any opportunities left. Anything else you want to add, Tally, or go a little deeper on before we wrap it up?
No, I think this is it. This is all I had.
Oh, one more question coming in here. Could you speak a bit about the performance of the tool while profiling big data?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we do a lot of stuff to make sure that we do the right thing for your table. We have a lot of enterprise customers, right, who are using really large data sets. And the main strategy that we will take is if you have a table that has, say, over 10 million rows a day, or its size is over 1 billion, we are going to query 1 day of data at a time, right? Rather than querying for 3 years of history at once. And we find that typically is very, very performant. So it takes a little longer to build up a history. We typically need a table to be configured for 2 weeks. So you start having a time series model on data volume, but then your queries are efficient and we're able to check your big tables. And we have a lot of customers using Anomalo on their very large tables.
Ooh, very cool. All right, Tally, I think that is all the questions that we have for today. This has been such a great demo. It really is such a clear, concise tool that I really appreciate this. And thanks everyone for attending. So appreciate. And this is this end of the session. So you'll hear us get the next speaker set up. Tally, thank you so much.
Thanks.